Why, there it is, January 4th, 2025, and welcome to the 5th season of Political Dharma with me, Alan Zundell. If I sound a little bit nasally today, it's because I am getting over the mild symptoms of the flu and still have some congestion in my sinuses. And that's kind of a perfect metaphor for starting out this new year as I contemplate politics in the United States. I feel a little bit sick, but not so sick that I don't feel like I can function and try to do something about it. Perspective of this show has always been that the United States has had a tension within it from the very establishment of the current government between the democratic aspirations of the general public, want to have their voices heard and make sure that the government is acting in their best interest. And on the other hand, oligarchic tendencies of the economy and the state structure that have been there from the beginning as well. And by oligarchy, I really mean rule by the wealthy and the corporate interests. So I think a major obstacle to the voice of the people being heard or their interests being addressed is the two-party system. When you only have two parties to choose from, you really can't go too far to, stage a protest against the way the government is going. We do see a major political realignment within the Republican Party under Donald Trump, and I will be interested in following that this year. We just had the Congress taking their seats in the 119th Congress yesterday, Friday, January 3rd. I'll be talking a little bit about that and the factions that have developed in the major parties. Also talking about what's going on in the world of third parties, minor parties, alternative parties, whatever you call them. I prefer to call them alternatives because they are alternatives to the big major party. They haven't gotten very far, but I'm interested to see developments because there's a lot of realization within that world that their preferred, their tactics of the last so many decades are not getting them very far. They're just never building support from one presidential election to the next, not really electing all that many people to office, don't see a trend in increasing people in office. So there's a lot of thought being given to how they can create new political formations or change their tactics or combine forces to try to give people more of a voice outside the two-party system. There's also efforts to reform our voting methods, and I'll have a news item about the top two system here in California and the lawsuit there, just a small bit of news. But that's the kind of stuff that I cover on this program, and I welcome you to it. Welcome you back if you've already been following me, and let's get into the news of this week. Yesterday, as I said, the 119th Congress took their seats, and there was a bit of drama over the election of the Speaker of the House. But first, let's look at the composition of this new Congress. In the United States Senate, of course, there are 100 seats with 2 seats given to each state, according to the Constitution. And what we have is 53 Republicans, that's a majority of the Senate, and 45 Democrats and 2 independents. Those independents would be Angus King of Maine, who caucuses with the Democrats, and the little-known senator from Vermont, I think his name is Bernie Sanders. He caucuses with the Democrats as well. So that's the composition of the U.S. Senate. The Republicans have a majority. They displaced the Democratic bare majority that they had before. They had 12 new senators taking their seats. Of course, in each 2-year cycle, only a third of the Senate is up for election because they have 6-year terms, and that's the way the Constitution was written. One of the Republican seats is still vacant at this time, so really there's this 52 of them are taking their seats. West Virginia Governor Jim Justice won his Senate seat in that state, but he's going to remain in the governor's office until his term expires on January 13th, and then he will go over to the Senate, be sworn into office for that seat, and he will be the 53rd Republican in Congress. There's also going to be 2 senators who are going to be leaving the Senate soon. J.D. Vance, for sure, when he is sworn in as vice president on January 20th, 2 weeks from now. He will have to leave his Senate seat, and there will be then the governor of his state, Ohio, will be appointing a temporary replacement for him, sure to be a Republican as well. And then they'll hold a special election sometime in 2026 to replace him in his Senate seat. Also, Marco Rubio, he's been selected by Donald Trump to be Secretary of State, If he gets confirmed by the Senate, he will resign his Senate seat and take office as Secretary of State. Same thing there. The governor of his state, Florida, will appoint somebody, and then there'll be a special election in 2026. And governor of Florida is that rabid Republican, Ron DeSantis, who will, of course, instate a Republican until that special election is held. So this is a gain of 4 seats for the Republicans from the last Congress, and it means that now they have a majority, and of course they have to contend with filibusters, which means you need about 2/3 of the Senate to get something passed sometimes if somebody decides to stage a protest. And the new majority leader of the Senate, John Thune, has said that he is not going to do away with the filibuster, even though Donald Trump has been pressuring him to do so. In the House of Representatives, you have 435 seats, and as you can tell by the color scheme on your visual, if you're watching this in video form, it's very close there as well. There's 220 Republicans and 215 Democrats. That means that the Republicans have added 1 seat to their majority in the House of Representatives. It's very close there. 1 seat is actually vacant, just like in the Senate. That is a Republican seat of Matt Gaetz of Florida. There's going to be a special election to replace him on April 1st. He resigned. He was up for consideration as Trump's pick for Attorney General. And then there was a lot of pushback against that, especially with an ongoing ethics investigation against him. He resigned his office, and he will not be up for Attorney General either. But in Florida, they will be appointing that they'll be holding a special election, on April 1st, meaning that the Republicans will be missing 1 person in the U.S. House as well until that election is held on April 1st. There's also a couple of possible vacancies coming up, as Trump has selected Michael Waltz of Florida be his national security advisor, which does not need Senate confirmation, so it seems pretty certain he will be leaving the House of Representatives to serve in the Trump administration. And Trump also selected Elise Stefanik of New York to be the ambassador to the United Nations, and that does require Senate confirmation, so she may or may not get the position. With the Republican majority in the Senate, it seems likely that a lot of Trump's picks will go through. More than 60 new members in the House. I think there was about 12 new senators, and Republicans just picked up a few seats in each of the houses, 4 in the Senate and 1 in the House of Representatives. So that's the composition of the 2 houses of the United States Congress. Republicans now have a majority, but it's just a bare majority. It's not going to allow them to run roughshod, especially in the Senate, because in the Senate, you have senators that have been there for decades and decades and think pretty highly of their role in the government and are not going to kowtow to any president, even though they may give lip service to him and agree to a lot of his demands or suggestions because he is a Republican president. But they have their own power base, and they think they'll be there. Some of them, 1/3 of them, will be there after Trump leaves office in 2028, assuming that things follow the natural course of political life in the United States. So they're not going to all bend over backwards for him. And of course, the Democrats are going to have a united bloc against a lot of what Trump's agenda is. Let's talk about what happened with the speaker's vote, because that shows some of the problems in the Republican caucus. Or they call it, they don't call it a caucus, they call it, I forget now. They use a different word for the same thing. In the House of Representatives, they have their vote. That's the first thing they do when they swear in the Congress, is they select a Speaker of the House. And the entire House gets the vote. So all the Democrats voted for their leader, their selected leader of this Congress, Hakeem Jeffries, who is now the minority leader because the Democrats are in the minority. And Michael Johnson, who was the Speaker of the House in the last Congress, he was up for re-election now. And when they cast the ballots first time around, he was not elected because the Republican majority is so slim. And there's 1 seat vacant, as I said. Matt Gaetz' seat in Florida is vacant. And another Republican, Tom Massey, said he was not going to vote for Johnson, and he did not. And there was 2 others who actually voted for somebody else, 2 other Republicans who voted for other Republicans rather than Johnson, and about 6 Republicans, most of them, I think, from the House Freedom Caucus, who did not vote at all in that first round of balloting. So Johnson had a problem on his hands, and he went around lobbying, got Trump to lobby on his behalf, and eventually he got most of them to come around, all except Thomas Massie. So he won 218 to 215, which is 3-vote margin. So he did get his position as Speaker of the House back, but it shows how fragile the Republican caucus is, that they have these tensions between the hardcore MAGA people, the so-called centrists, and especially in the Senate, who have these have this long-term perspective. Okay, Trump comes up, he will be gone eventually, and we have our own ideas about what republicanism means. It's usually more having to do with business interests and less to do with immigration and all the other things that Trump hammers on. So they've got problems with some of their centrists, their so-called moderates, which in my eyes are not all that moderate. And those who are not happy with this new Speaker of the House feel like he's too compromising in one way or the other. The moderates think he leans too much towards the radicals in the Freedom Caucus. The Freedom Caucus thinks he's a little too solicitous of the centrists. So they got their problems for sure. Now, on the Democratic side, what they've been trying to do is assess what went wrong in this presidential election, why they lost the presidency this time around, as well as losing the Senate and losing an additional seat in the House of Representatives. We had an interesting article. Oh, wait a minute. There's one other thing I wanted to talk about. Which was Musk, in terms of the divisions within Republicans. Elon Musk, the head of Tesla, that is now becoming a household name. He's not a natural born citizen, so he can't run for president, but he has become quite an influence within Trump's inner circle. A couple of the news items that come up in the last few weeks had to do with Elon Musk and his effect on the Republicans in office. For one thing, more recently, they've been fighting about this H-1B visa thing, which is that they can give special permission to highly educated foreigners who want to come in and work in the United States. And Musk wants to retain this provision, where a lot of Republicans in the Congress said, no, we want to block immigration entirely. So that's what the MAGA base has been expecting, that we're going to restrict immigration across the board, especially when it competes, when foreigners are competing with Americans for jobs here. And that's the case in the high-tech industry, like the X on Twitter, or in other areas. The Elon Musk, he wants to bring over cheap labor to work for his type of projects, artificial intelligence and the systems within his cars that require, they have computerized systems and other things. So he's fighting for that, and others in the Republicans are fighting against it. And it has to do, at least in part, with his financial interests. Another one that was that happened recently was the fight over the budget. The House of Representatives had decided painstakingly on a budget bill that they were going to pass at the end of the last session in December, just a few weeks ago, and it got blown up at the last minute by Elon Musk making some objections to it. And as it turns out, this is from the American Prospect, an article by David Dayen. Investigative reporting here shows that, okay, we had this budget bill. It looked like it was going to pass. Elon Musk raised the stink about it on all kinds of issues. And then they made a few changes, and they passed it all over again. Now, they didn't make huge changes, but among the few changes they made was a provision which would have blocked investments in China, especially in areas of critical intellectual property like artificial intelligence. And as it turns out, Elon Musk has investments in China, and he's been planning more investments in China to help sell cars there, as well as to work on artificial intelligence. So in two cases here, we see yet another problem within the within the Republican caucus, having to do with oligarch, a very wealthy person, wealthiest in the country, wealthiest in the world, I hear at this point. I know he's fabulously wealthy, and he wants to translate that into more political power. And he seems to be doing that. That is the definition of an oligarchic government, that the people with the most wealth are the ones that have the most influence on the decisions of the government. And it seems like he's using them to his own financial advantage, as though he needs more money. Of course, he would say he has other principled reasons for it. And who can read a man's heart, right? Or a woman's heart, for that matter. That the latter is a little harder for me, actually. So let's get back to the Democrats. What's happening here? There's an article in Jacobin on their online website. Who will win the Democrats blame game? Okay, there's a lot of finger pointing about why they lost that election. And in this article, I thought it was interesting because Adam Hilton, the author, broke the Democratic caucus into three factions. I would have said two: the progressives and the more centrists, who aligned a little bit more with Joe Biden. The previous commitment to neoliberalism, excuse me with mangling that word, neoliberalism, that started really with Jimmy Carter, the recently deceased ex-president, and in full force with Bill Clinton, following with Ronald Reagan, sandwiched in between, moving it also in this direction. Increasing global trade, removing trade barriers in the United States, making these alliances with other countries like NAFTA with Mexico and Canada. So there's been a backtracking from that to some degree in both parties, especially in the Republicans, but also in the Democratic Party. We had centrists like Joe Biden, who has instituted a different kind of economic policy than just promoting global trade, which was industrial, which is called industrial policy. It means the government making some kind of strategic, giving strategic help to particular industries to develop further in the United States. So they're using especially tax credits and incentives for private investment to invest in clean energy and the utilization of technology developed in the United States to create factories and things to produce these kind of products, instead of letting it go over to China and losing all that technical development. So that's the one faction, the centrists. The other is the progressives. You would be familiar with Bernie Sanders, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and the general idea here is to let's go back towards the New Deal type of Democratic Party, where they had a lot of regulations on business for the advantages of workers or consumers or the general public, and we had many more programs to help people. Child tax credits is one that recently has been promoted and expired, increasing the minimum wage. All those kinds of things. They're more online with that. They call themselves democratic socialists, but in political philosophy, I think they would generally be called more social democrats, because they are not really, at least rhetorically, addressing or attacking capitalism per se. They really want a form of managed capitalism that has an extensive protective safety net for the general public. So that would be the second faction. And the third faction is actually people who are, he calls accommodationists, people who would accommodate Trump and the Republicans, that feel like maybe the Democratic Party needs to do more to restrict immigration, get on board with that, cut the budget, cut excessive spending in their eyes. It's always been Democrats in alignment with that. So we see the Democrats riven right now. They don't have a clear leader. They have leaders in each house of the Congress. Chuck Schumer remains as the leader of the Democrats in the Senate, and we have Hakeem Jeffries in the House, but no overall leader. Kamala Harris and Joe Biden are not going to be looked at for leadership of the party. So it remains to be seen which of these factions is going to produce somebody that by 2028 can start to knit them back together, if that's even possible. I don't think it is. The Democratic Party will remain a coalition of opposites, and they may lose some of their progressive people to third-party attempts, especially if attempts to bring together third parties on the left, a little further left than New Deal social democrats, towards actual democratic socialism and even more overt forms of socialism, bear any fruit. All right, so Democrats and Republicans both have a lot of fault lines and fissures in their coalitions, but they still retain the government power. What else is happening in the world of politics here? In the world of minor parties, there was an article in the Independent Political Report by Chris Powell, where he counted up the number of minor parties or alternative parties in each state of the United States who now have ballot access after the presidential election. And you see on your screen, if you're watching, that he's color-coded the entire United States, and we have a range from no alternative parties having ballot access in many of the states to some having as many as 5 or more parties on their ballot, such as I think Oregon does have maybe 6 or so. Everywhere in between as well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 alternative parties, and he lists them state by state. So if you go to a report and scroll down, find this. This is from the end of last year, December 31st. You can find your own state and find out not only which parties, which alternative parties are still on the ballot in your state, but you can also find out something about what your state uses as criteria to determine how parties get on the ballot. So that is a handy thing to have, especially if you're interested in these minor party movements and trying to help facilitate that, to learn something about your own state and what the laws in that state are regarding ballot access. Okay, well, let's look at the Libertarian Party. I've been chronicling their internal fissures as well. The Libertarian Party is not in a good place from what I can see. And recently it was reported on the Third Party Watch. This is another article by George Phillies, or Phillies. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name. Phillies. I think it's Phillies. I don't know. Major FEC action on Kennedy Victory Fund. Now, FEC refers to the Federal Elections Commission. That is the federal agency that monitors campaign spending. And the Kennedy Victory Fund is this fund that was set up in combination with the Libertarian Party to help raise money for Kennedy's campaign, as well as raise money for some Libertarian state parties and special PACs as well. And the FEC has requested additional information from a lot of these entities that were benefiting from this arrangement. I've highlighted there some of these problems that the FEC is saying, that 4 state parties, that is Libertarian parties in 4 states, appear to have filed false information. Some of the organizations involving members of the Libertarian National Committee didn't file their reports by the deadline required. And at least one Libertarian National Committee member received a potentially unethical contribution on the day of a vote. I'm not sure who that is, but there's been a lot of finger pointing in the party at the chair of the National Committee, Angela McArdle, and her handling of this election and her involvement in this Kennedy Victory Fund and some of the entities benefiting financially from that fund. There's accusations that her partner has, that is her, the person she lives with, her domestic partner or her man in the house, however you want to refer to it, has benefited financially, that his firm is that was set up to give campaign consulting or something benefited from some of this money. Anyway, there's a lot of finger pointing going on and a lawsuit as well. Their former secretary of the Libertarian National Committee is suing the party to remove Angela McArdle from her position as chair. And there's been some back and forth in the courts on that. Speaking of the court system, and this story is from Ballot Access News, a good resource for understanding ins and outs of ballot access, as posted at the end of the year, December 28th, by Richard Winger, the main editor of that online publication. They also have a paper version as well. Anyway, it says the state of California was required to respond to a lawsuit of the Peace and Freedom Party, Libertarian Party, and others against its top 2 electoral system, where all the candidates from all the parties run together in one primary, and the 2 who got the most votes go to the general election. Parties and some individuals have brought a lawsuit against that. The state of California had to respond by January 2nd, but the court granted an extension, and this is not, they don't have to respond until January 31st. So just a note on that one. I don't have any idea when the trial will start. It'd be interesting to see how that plays out, in part because I am now a resident of California, and I've been talking about this third party idea where you try to bring together independents and alternative party candidates in one election to nominate someone or endorse them for office. And if they change the primary system here, if they change the electoral system, I'll have to change how we go about it here in the States. So I was planning to do this demonstration project for this idea about a different kind of third party here in California, focusing on the upcoming governor's race in 2026. But if the court decision forces changes in this electoral system, that will affect my plans as well. If you're interested in this idea, I've been expounding on it a little more fully on my website at politicaldharma.com. It's called the Third Party Project. I will be talking about that more in future episodes. And I do have a blog you can sign up for if you want to keep abreast of the situation, as well as the ideas I have for another party as well. And I'm not even going to start that today. Anything else I wanted to say this week? You may have noticed that things look a little different around here. I have some pictures on the wall. The reason I didn't put them up before, I did have that picture of Mohandas Gandhi that's behind me over a month ago, but I didn't put it up because as my daughter and I were going to put it up, if you look, see, I look somewhat like Gandhi now. I'm not nearly as thin as he was, but with the bald head, the glasses, everything, and the mustache. I wanted to get another picture to balance that out. And the other picture here that I got more recently is what is usually called Jesus cleansing the temple or driving out the money changers. And I have a story behind that I want to tell you at some point as well, why I have that on my wall. But as Political Dharma, you might notice from the Dharma part of it, I do have a spiritual dimension to the show that I don't talk about a lot, but I will be talking about it somewhat in the coming year. And I think that's about it for this time. I will be producing these videos regularly again this year, at least one every weekend, I think, catching up on the news, and then in between when I can, expounding on other elements of our political life here. Thanks again for watching. You can find us on YouTube, Rumble, Spotify, some podcast platforms. I also am experimenting with Instagram and Blue Sky, and putting up the short videos from there. And I got rid of my Patreon page, so those of you who are on that have already been notified of that. The way you can help me financially is two ways. Number one, watch this video and you'll be seeing the ads. The ads pay for some of this. And the other one is if you want to make a donation, go to the website. That's it for this week. Thanks a lot for watching. And I hope I feel better next week. I hope you're feeling good. And I hope we have a better year than we might be expecting. Or maybe you are excited about the coming year. Let's think positively. All right.